I knew the axe was coming when Tyler, our new 30-something CEO who thinks synergy is a personality trait, replaced the mahogany conference table with a communal beanbag circle. You can't negotiate freight contracts with a Romanian trucking syndicate while sitting on a neon green sack that sounds like it's passing gas every time you shift your weight. But I didn't think he'd actually pull the trigger on me. I'm the head of National Inventory Operations. I'm the reason the toilets flush in 480 warehouses across the Midwest. I'm the reason the shelves aren't stocked with rat poison instead of baby formula. I sat across from Tyler in his transparency aquarium, a glass office that smelled like sandalwood and unjustified confidence. He was wearing a vest made of recycled water bottles and a smile that didn't reach his dead, shark-like eyes. Karen, he said, clasping his hands together like he was about to lead a prayer circle for quarterly earnings. We've been doing a deep dive into the company's chakras. And well, your energy, it's very legacy system. It's dense. It doesn't flow with the agile, liquid manifesto we're pivoting toward. I stared at him. I could feel the pack of ultra slims in my purse calling my name like a siren song. You're firing me because of my chakras, Tyler. I balanced a $14 million variance in the city hub last week while you were at a silent retreat in Chalum. It's not firing, he corrected, his voice dripping with toxic positivity. It's a release. We're releasing you to find a tribe that resonates with your specific frequency. Your vibe just doesn't match the future of global logistics. I looked at the clock on the wall, 1:40 p.m. The daily inventory hard sync, digital heartbeat of this entire godforsaken empire, was scheduled to run its handshake protocol at 2:00 p.m. It required a biometric key. My biometric key. Without it, the system doesn't just pause. It assumes a security breach and locks down the database like Fort Knox during a zombie apocalypse. Hey, real quick, before I tell you how I turned this guy's liquid manifesto into a literal flood of sewage, if you're digging the pettiness, smash that subscribe button and drop a like. It keeps the caffeine flowing and the rage pure. Thanks, you're the best. My vibe, I repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. Okay, Tyler, you're the boss. You want liquid energy? You got it. I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the artisanal succulent on his desk through the glass wall, even though the urge was stronger than my desire to breathe. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out my security badge, the one with the clearance level higher than his, and slid it across the reclaimed wood desk. You have 20 minutes, I said, my voice flat like a tire on a gravel road. Tyler blinked, confused. 20 minutes to what? Clear your desk? Take your time, Karen. We want this transition to be holistic. 20 minutes before the ghost in the machine realizes I'm gone, I said, turning toward the door. You see, Tyler, that legacy system you hate. It's held together by duct tape, 3 lines of code written in 1998, and my personal override. If I don't authenticate the 2:00 p.m. sync, the servers assume the company has been hostilely taken over. They sever the connection to the lenders. They freeze the shipping manifests. The trucks stop. The forklifts lock. He laughed. A nervous, dry sound. You're bluffing. The tech team assured me everything is cloud native now. The tech team, I scoffed, pausing with my hand on the door handle. You mean the 3 guys you hired because they had cool, distinct tattoos and lied on their resumes about knowing COBOL? Good luck with that. Tell your lenders I said good luck, I added, stepping out into the hallway. I walked past the open plan office, past the rows of terrified 20-somethings staring at their screens, and I felt a cold, dark satisfaction settling in my chest. It wasn't the heat of anger anymore. It was the icy calm of a demolition expert watching the timer count down to single digits. He wanted a vibe check? I was about to give him a seismic event. The elevator ride down from the 40th floor took 45 seconds. That's enough time to replay 10 years of missed birthdays, skipped anniversaries, and nights spent sleeping on a cot in a warehouse in Detroit because a blizzard knocked out the power and the backup generators needed a manual kickstart. I gave this company my youth. I gave them my cartilage. My knees click like a Geiger counter every time it rains because I spent the winter of 2016 walking concrete floors to manually verify inventory when the scanners went down. And for what? To be told my vibe was off by a guy whose hardest day of work involved choosing between oat milk and almond milk for his latte. The doors dinged open to the lobby. It was pristine marble, polished to a mirror shine that reflected my worn-out blazer and the dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I walked past the security desk. Old Man Miller was there, the only other person in this building who knew the difference between a pallet jack and a jackass. Leaving early, Miss Karen? Miller asked, looking up from his crossword puzzle. Permanent vacation, Miller, I said, stopping to fish the visitor pass out of my purse. I realized I still had the company credit card. I tossed it on his desk. Tyler's idea. Apparently I'm bad for the feng shui. Miller snorted. That boy wouldn't know feng shui if it bit him in the ass. You take care, you hear? Place is gonna fall apart without you. That's the plan, I muttered, pushing through the revolving doors and into the humid, exhaust-filled air of the city street. The moment I stepped onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It's a distinctive vibration, too short, one long, the panic pattern. I pulled it out. Alert, system sync authorization missing. Warehouse 117, Warehouse 118, Warehouse 119. The list scrolled down the screen like the credits of a movie where everyone dies at the end. It was 2:01 p.m. I lit a cigarette. I know, it's a filthy habit, but when you spend your life inhaling diesel fumes and forklift exhaust, a little tobacco feels like fresh mountain air. I took a deep drag and watched the smoke curl up toward the glass tower I'd just been evicted from. Up there on the 40th floor, the silence was breaking. I knew exactly what was happening. The dashboard of truth, a monitor Tyler had installed to show real-time profits, was currently flashing red, not a soft, aesthetic coral red. We're talking nuclear meltdown red. My phone buzzed again, and again, and again. It was the operations leaders group chat, a chat I had been removed from 10 minutes ago, but apparently the system hadn't updated the permissions yet. Chad, VP of Ops. Guys, why is the city distribution center showing zero inventory? Jessica HR. Is this a glitch? The dashboard says we have negative stock. Tyler, CEO. Who has the override code? Karen just left. Someone call her. I smirked, exhaling a cloud of gray smoke. The override code wasn't a number you wrote on a sticky note. It was a sequence of decisions based on variable logic that lived entirely in my brain. It was knowing that the scanner in Bay 4 of the Texas hub always reads double on Tuesdays because of the sun glare, and you have to manually deduct 10%. It was knowing that the emergency stop on the server wasn't a button, but a command line script I wrote in 2011 called Do Not Touch, or DIE. They didn't just fire an employee, they deleted the operating system. I walked to my car, a reliable, dented sedan that had survived more road salt than a pretzel factory, and threw my bag in the passenger seat. I wasn't going home to cry into a tub of ice cream. I had one more stop to make. A stop that would ensure this bridge didn't just burn, it would be nuked from orbit. I keyed the ignition. The engine purred. My phone was vibrating so hard on the center console it was slowly moving toward the edge like a suicidal lemming. Incoming call, Tyler, CEO. I let it ring. Let them sweat. Let them feel the vibe of absolute, unmitigated panic. I put the car in drive and merged into traffic. The chaos was just beginning, and I had a front row seat to the apocalypse. You have to understand, a logistics network is like a living organism. It breathes. It eats. Craps, and if you cut the nerve connection between the brain and the bowels, things get messy very, very fast. While I was merging onto the I-90, humming along to Tom Petty, the digital nerve center of global logistics was suffering a massive stroke. Here's what Tyler didn't know. The legacy system wasn't just counting boxes. It was a translator. It took the garbage data from our ancient, rusted-out conveyor belts and translated it into the shiny, happy numbers the banks like to see. Without my authorization code, which ran a script scrubbing that garbage data, the raw feed was hitting the main server for the first time in history. Back in the office, I imagined the scene was shifting from mild concern to Lord of the Flies. The first symptom would be the phantom inventory. The system, seeing unverified data, defaults to safe mode. In safe mode, to prevent theft, it marks everything as missing/quarantined. So, at 2:15 p.m., a sales rep in Chicago probably tried to process an order for 5,000 units of high-end consumer electronics. He would have typed in the SKU, hit enter, and watched the screen blink. Error, zero stock available. That's impossible, he'd shout, spilling his kombucha. I saw 3 pallets on the dock this morning. He'd checked the system again. Stock location, unknown. Status, lost. Now multiply that by 480 warehouses. My phone was now silent. Not because they stopped calling, but because I'd put it on Do Not Disturb. However, my car's Bluetooth display was still syncing the notifications. Text from Brenda, Warehouse MGR, Iowa. Karen, honey, the scanners are locked. Drivers are backed up to the gate. They're getting angry. One of them has a tire iron. Where are you? My heart twinged for Brenda. She was good people. She made a killer potato salad and didn't deserve this. Collateral damage was unavoidable in a revolution. I mentally apologized to Brenda and kept driving. The real problem wasn't the trucks, though. It was the money. The company operated on a revolving credit line. The lenders had a bot, a nasty little algorithm, that pinged our inventory levels every hour to ensure we had enough collateral to cover our loans. If the inventory dropped below a certain threshold, the credit line froze automatically. At 2:30 p.m., the inventory didn't just drop. It vanished. According to the computer, Global Logistics was now a company that owned absolutely nothing but some leased office furniture and a lot of expensive bean bags. I imagined Tyler standing in the middle of the chaos, his vest unzipped, sweat staining the armpits of his organic cotton shirt. The agile team he'd hired, boys who looked like they should be shredding guitar solos, not spreadsheets, would be frantically typing on keyboards that were no longer connected to anything that mattered. Reboot it, Tyler would be screaming. Just turn it off and on again. But you can't reboot a famine. You can't reboot a void. I was heading out of the city now, the skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. The air was getting cleaner, the roads emptier. I was driving toward the only person who could appreciate the sheer, artistic beauty of this disaster. I reached for my water bottle and took a sip. It tasted like freedom and vengeance, but mostly vengeance. The scary part? I hadn't even unleashed the worst of it yet. The kill switch wasn't just about hiding the inventory, it was about the routing. At 3 p.m., the automated dispatch system updates the GPS for every truck in the fleet. If the inventory is 0, the system assumes the trucks are empty. It tells them to return to base. Thousands of trucks halfway to their destinations were about to pull U-turns on highways across America. Deliveries of medicine, food, parts, all turning around because a computer thought they were hauling air. The radio DJ came on. Traffic alert, major congestion building up on all arteries leading into the industrial district. Avoid the area if you can. I turned the volume up. Music to my ears, I whispered. By 3:15 p.m., the Transparency Aquarium had likely turned into a mosh pit of incompetence. I know exactly what was happening because I know who Tyler hired to replace my team. He fired my lead sysadmin, a guy named Stan who looked like a thumb and smelled like old ham but could code an assembly while asleep. In his place, Tyler hired a digital nomad named Braden who lists disruptor as a skill on LinkedIn. Here's the thing about Braden. He thinks the cloud is magic. He thinks if something breaks, you just spin up a new instance. But our system wasn't in the cloud, Braden. It was on a mainframe in the basement of a building in New Jersey that flooded every time a hurricane looked at the East Coast funny. I could picture Braden right now frantic, his man bun unraveling. The API isn't responding. He'd be shouting, tapping on his MacBook Air. I can't push the hotfix. Why isn't it responding? Tyler would demand, his voice cracking. Because there is no API, someone from accounting, probably old Doris, would yell from the back. Karen built a bridge using an Excel macro and a prayer, and she took the prayer with her. My phone lit up again. This time, a voicemail notification popped up. I tapped play through the car speakers. Karen, this is Tyler. Look, there seems to be a small misalignment of the data spheres. We need that password. Now, this isn't funny. If you don't call me back in 5 minutes, I'm contacting legal. You can't hold company property hostage. Company property? I laughed out loud, startling a cow in a pasture I was passing. Honey, that property is a cognitive map of a schizophrenic labyrinth I spent 10 years memorizing. You can't sue me for my memories. The irony was delicious. For years, I begged them for a budget to upgrade. I wrote proposal after proposal, risk assessment, catastrophic failure imminent without system migration. Tyler had used those proposals as coasters. He told me I was being alarmist and resistant to change. Well, how's that for change, Tyler? The scramble back at HQ would be shifting from technical to physical. The operations leads would be flooding the conference rooms, printing out spreadsheets from last month, trying to manually reconcile stock. It's 2024, and they're probably looking for fax machines. Does anyone know how the system actually works? Someone would shout, and the silence that followed that question would be deafening. That silence was my resume. That silence was the ghost of every weekend I worked for free. That silence was the void left by every thank you they never said. I pulled off the highway onto a gravel road. The trees were dense here, shielding the world from the chaos I'd left behind. The reception was spotty, but a text from an unknown number managed to squeeze through. Known lenders just froze the credit line. Trucks are turning around. Tyler is crying in the bathroom. What did you do? I didn't recognize the number, but the tone sounded like Stan. Good old Stan. He probably hacked into the internal comms just to watch the fire. I didn't reply. I just kept driving up the winding path toward the lake house. The engine clicked and cooled as the road leveled out. I wasn't just driving to a house, I was driving to the past. The man who started it all. The man who actually knew what a pallet jack was. Because the only thing scarier than a pissed-off woman with the keys to the kingdom is a pissed-off woman bringing the king out of retirement. Jim's cabin wasn't a cottage. It was a fortress made of cedar and stone, overlooking a lake that looked like a sheet of hammered steel. Jim founded Global Logistics 40 years ago with one truck and a bad back. He retired 5 years ago, handing the keys to his son Tyler with the explicit instruction, don't touch the operations. Let Karen run the engine, you just polish the hood. I parked next to his vintage Ford pickup. The air smelled of pine needles and wood smoke. It was quiet, a holy kind of quiet. Jim was on the porch, whittling a stick. He looked like a bear that had decided to wear flannel and retire. He looked up as I approached, his eyes narrowing under bushy white brows. We're supposed to be in the 2:00 sync meeting, he rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel tumbling in a dryer. I was released, I said, leaning against the porch railing. My vibe didn't match the future vision. Jim's knife stopped moving. He looked at me, then at the stick, then back at me. Your vibe? My chakras were dense, Jim. I was blocking the flow. Jim slowly set the knife down. He didn't explode. Jim never exploded. He imploded, creating a vacuum that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Tyler fired you? On a Thursday? Before the hard sync, he released me, gave me 20 minutes to clear out, so I cleared out, and so did my authentication protocol. Jim closed his eyes. He did the math instantly. He knew the system better than anyone except me. He knew about the credit lines. He knew about the truck routing. He knew about the phantom inventory. The lenders, he asked softly. Frozen. I said as of about 30 minutes ago. The trucks, turning around. U-turns on the I-95. It's probably on the news by now. Jim let out a long, slow breath. He reached for the bottle of bourbon sitting on the table next to him and poured 2 glasses. No ice. He slid one across the table to me. You warned him? I told him he had 20 minutes, and he asked me if I wanted to take a mindfulness pause. Jim took a sip of the bourbon. He stared out at the lake. I built that company with sweat and blood. I missed my daughter's graduation to secure the Midwest hub. I missed my wife's birthday to fix the routing algorithm. He turned to look at me, his eyes hard. And he fired the mechanic because he didn't like the grease on her hands. He pulled a sat phone out of his pocket. It was the only thing that worked out here reliably. Who are you calling? I asked, taking a drink. The burn was pleasant. The chairman of the board, Jim said, punching in a number, and then the bank. He put the phone to his ear. George, it's Jim. Shut up and listen. My son is an idiot. He just severed the brain stem of the company. No, don't talk to him. He doesn't know what's happening. Pull the audit logs. Look for the termination of user Karen admin root. Yeah, that's the one. When you see the timestamps, you're going to want to pour yourself a drink. He paused, listening to the squawking on the other end. Fix it? Jim laughed, a dark, terrifying sound. I can't fix it. You can't fix it. There's only one person on this planet who can fix it, and she's currently drinking my best bourbon and watching the sunset. You better hope she's in a negotiating mood. He hung up and looked at me. A small, grim smile played on his lips. He's panic buying stock options. He thinks it's a glitch. He's about to learn, I said, swirling the amber liquid. That gravity isn't a glitch. While Jim and I were watching a pair of eagles circle the lake, the global logistics headquarters was effectively burning to the ground. Here's the thing about logistics. It runs on credit. Fuel is expensive. We're talking millions of dollars in diesel every week. The drivers carry fleet cards. Those cards are linked to the credit line. When the inventory hit zero, the bank's algorithm didn't just freeze the corporate accounts. It flagged the fleet cards as high risk. My phone buzzed. A text from Stan, the ex-sysadmin. Stan, dude, fuel cards are declining at the pumps. Drivers are stranded in nowhere, Nebraska. They're tweeting pictures of the declined screens. #global logistics collapse is trending #4 on Twitter, above the Kardashians. I showed the text to Jim. He shook his head. Amateurs. Then came the barrage from Tyler. He must have realized legal threats weren't working, so now he was trying the emotional manipulation angle. Tyler, 3:45 p.m. Karen, I feel like we got off on the wrong foot. I want to hold space for your feelings. Let's co-create a solution. Tyler, 3:50 p.m. Karen, the bank is on the phone. They're saying something about a covenant breach. I don't know what that is. Please pick up. Tyler, 4:00 p.m. Pick up the phone, Karen. The trucks have stopped. My dad isn't answering. Why are you doing this? I read them out loud to Jim like poetry. Co-create a solution, Jim muttered, spitting on the ground. I should have sent him to trade school. The reality of the collapse was simple but devastating. Without the inventory verification, we couldn't invoice. Without invoices, we had no receivables. Without receivables, the bank saw us as a bankrupt entity. The automated systems were faster than any human. They were executing the death of the company in nanoseconds. In the warehouse breakrooms, the rumors would be flying. Check didn't clear. Is the company under investigation? The warehouse managers, the sturdy men and women I'd trained, would be trying to keep order, but you can't tell a trucker his fuel card is declined and expect a hug. You get a riot. I took another sip of bourbon. You know, Jim, the funniest part? If he had just waited until 2:30 p.m. to fire me, the sink would have run. He would have had 24 hours to figure it out. But he had to do it before the energy shifted. Jim looked at his watch. The board meeting is starting in 10 minutes. Emergency session. They're going to patch us in. Us? You think I'm doing this without you? Jim stood up, his knees cracking. You're the asset, Karen. Today, you're the most valuable asset in the portfolio. Price just went up. He walked inside to the landline, rotary phone that sat on a desk made of solid oak. It was the only phone he trusted for serious business. I followed him. The sun was dipping below the tree line, casting long, bloody shadows across the cabin floor. The silence out here was peaceful, but I could hear the phantom screams of Tyler's career dying in the distance. The phone rang. It was a shrill, mechanical sound. Jim picked it up. Speak. He listened for a moment, his face stone cold. Then he looked at me and winked. No, Tyler isn't invited to this call, Jim said into the receiver. Put him in the waiting room or the playpen. I don't care. We're talking about adults now. He put the phone on speaker. Karen, it was the chairman of the board. Are you there? I'm here, George, I said, my voice steady. Just enjoying the vibe. The speakerphone crackled. I could hear the tension in the boardroom 300 miles away. I could almost hear the squeak of their expensive leather chairs as they shifted uncomfortably. Karen, George said, his voice trying to be authoritative but landing somewhere near desperate. We need to resolve the situation immediately. The lenders are threatening to call the loans. We're bleeding cash by the second. That sounds stressful, George, I said, leaning against Jim's desk. But I don't work for Global Logistics anymore. I was released. Remember? Yes, we know. Another board member chimed in. A misunderstanding. Tyler acted prematurely. Tyler acted, Jim cut in, his voice booming like a fool with a hand grenade. Now let's cut the crap. You want the system back up? You need Karen. She's the only one with the biometric root access. The tech team you hired, they're trying to use a crowbar on a digital lock. If they force it, they wipe the database. Permanently. Silence. They knew it was true. What do you want, Karen? George asked. I looked at Jim. He nodded. First, I said, counting on my fingers, I don't come back as an employee. I come back as an external consultant. My rate is triple my old salary, billed hourly, with a minimum retainer of 6 months paid up front. Done, George said immediately. Too fast, I should have asked for quadruple. Second, I continued. Complete autonomy over operations. No vibe checks, no bean bags, no agile sprints run by people who have never lifted a box. I hire my old team back. Stan, Brenda, all of them, with a 20% raise and an apology letter signed by the board. That's highly irregular, George stammered. HR policies. The trucks are stopped, George, I reminded him. Do you want to talk about HR policies or do you want the fleet moving? Fine. Agreed. Third, I said, taking a breath, and this one is non-negotiable. Tyler is removed from the operational chain of command. He is not allowed to speak to me, look at me, or email me about his spirit animal. He stays in his glass aquarium and plays with his succulents until you find a replacement. There was a long pause. Removing the founder's son was tricky politics. He's the CEO, Karen, George said weakly. He's a liability, Jim roared into the phone. Do it, George, or I'll sell my shares tomorrow and tank the stock so hard it'll be delisted by lunch. Okay, George yelled. We'll restructure his role. He'll focus on brand vision, strategic partnerships, far away from operations. Good, I said. Draft the contract. Send it to Jim's fax machine. Yes, he still has a fax machine. It's more reliable than your CEO. When can you be here? I'm 3 hours away, I said. System stays down until I walk through those doors. Can't you? Give us the code over the phone, George asked, a glimmer of hope in his voice. George, I said, my vibe really needs to be present to facilitate the energy transfer. Isn't that right? I hung up the phone. Jim let out a bark of laughter that shook the dust off the rafters. You're a shark, Karen, he said, pouring me another finger of bourbon. I taught you well. You taught me how to fix the machine, I said, raising my glass. Tyler taught me how to break it. We drank to the silence of the trucks. For 3 more hours, the world would have to wait. I pulled up to the Global Logistics Tower at 8:00 p.m. The parking lot, usually empty by now, was full. Lights were blazing on every floor. It looked like the Titanic, but vertical and with better Wi-Fi. Jim had driven down with me in his truck. We walked into the lobby together. Miller was still at the security desk, but he was surrounded by panicked executives in suits. When Miller saw me, he actually stood up and saluted. Welcome back, ma'am, he said, grinning. We took the elevator up. The silence in the lift was heavy. Jim was cracking his knuckles. I was just checking my lipstick in the reflection of the brass doors. If you're going to save the world, you should look good doing it. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the smell hit me first. Stale coffee, nervous sweat, and pizza boxes. The transparency aquarium was crowded. George, the chairman, was there. The legal team, and in the corner, sitting on his beanbag, was Tyler. He looked rough, his vest was unbuttoned, his hair was messy. He looked like a child who had broken his mother's favorite vase and was waiting for the wooden spoon. When I walked in, the room went silent. You could hear a pin drop or a stock price plummet. The contract is signed, George said, thrusting a paper at me. Wire transfer is cleared. Please, Karen, fix it. I didn't say a word. I walked past them, straight to my old desk. It had already been half cleared, my ergonomic chair replaced by a yoga ball. I kicked the ball across the room. It bounced off a glass partition with a satisfying thwack. I dragged a real chair over from the nearest cubicle. I sat down. I pulled out my laptop. I hadn't returned it yet, fortunately. I plugged into the hard line. What do we do? One of the new Agile developers whispered, hovering behind me. Do we need to reprovision the server nodes? Go sit down, Braden, I said without looking back, and don't touch anything. I opened the terminal. The screen was a wall of red error text. System lockdown. Authentication required. I typed in my username, Karen Ops Prime. I typed in my password. No, I'm not telling you what it is, but it involves an obscene acronym about Tyler's dad. I placed my thumb on the scanner. Biometric confirmed. Initiating sync. Reconciling inventory. Restoring credit lines. The screen turned from red to green. It took exactly 45 seconds. The room let out a collective breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Phones started ringing immediately, bankers, warehouse managers, drivers, all calling to ask why the lights just came back on. I stood up and closed the laptop. I turned to face the room. Inventory is live, I said. Trucks will receive updated routing in 3 minutes. Lenders will see the assets within 5. George slumped against the wall, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Thank God. I looked at Tyler. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the floor, picking at a loose thread on his recycled vest. One more thing, I said to the room, but looking at him. My team, Stan, Brenda, the rest, they'll be back at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. I want their desks back. I want the bean bags gone. And I want a coffee machine that dispenses actual caffeine, not matcha water. Whatever you want, George said, just keep it running. Oh, I'll keep it running, I said, as long as the check's clear. The meeting broke up. The lawyers scurried out like roaches when the lights turn on. Jim gave me a pat on the shoulder that nearly dislocated my clavicle, his version of a hug, and went to deal with the board. I was the last one to leave the aquarium. I walked out into the hallway, feeling the weight of the day pressing on my shoulders. I was exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind you feel after you've successfully reassembled an engine or dismantled an ego. Karen, I stopped. It was Tyler. He was standing in the doorway of his office, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The swagger was gone. The spiritual buzzwords had evaporated. He struggled to find the words. I didn't know the system was that dependent on you. I turned slowly. That's the problem, Tyler. You saw the machine, but you didn't see the mechanic. You thought you could run a freight train on good intentions and oat milk. I just wanted to modernize, he whispered. I wanted to change the culture. You did, I said. You created a culture of fear. And then you created a culture of bankruptcy. Congratulations. He looked at me, his eyes wet. Is my dad going to fire me? I don't know, I lied. I knew. Jim was currently drafting the press release announcing Tyler's transition to a non-executive role in charitable outreach. But I do know one thing. I stepped closer to him. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the sound of a system working exactly as it should. You fired me for my vibe, I said softly, savoring the words. You said I was too dense, too heavy. I tapped my security badge. The new consultant-level badge George had just printed for me. Turns out, I said, my vibe was the only thing keeping this place from collapsing under its own bullshit. I leaned in, just inches from his face, and smiled. A real, genuine, terrifying smile. Vibe check, I whispered. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked to the elevator, punched the button, and rode it down to the lobby. Outside, the night air was cool. I walked to my car, got in, and drove to the nearest 24-hour diner. I ordered a steak, rare, and a black coffee. I sat there alone, listening to the scanner app on my phone. Unit 445 en route to Cleveland, all clear. Dispatch to Unit 102, routing updated. Proceed to dock. The voices of the drivers, the warehouse workers, the people who actually move the world. They were back online. I took a bite of the steak. It was tough, greasy, and absolutely perfect. I pulled up my banking app. The retainer had hit, a number with a lot of zeros. I might be a legacy system, but legacies last. Vibes, they just evaporate. I took a sip of coffee and lit a cigarette right there in the parking lot, blowing the smoke toward the moon. We're all healed. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.